Good evening, friends. How are you? No, that's not enough. How are you? Yeah, that's good. All right. How was dinner? Good? Very good, very good. Okay. Periodically, we have this kind of gathering in Baha'i Center to increase our knowledge about different religion, including the Baha'i faith. And we are lucky tonight that we have Tony Ballard as our speaker. And Baha'u'llah, in one of his quotations, said that from the darkness of ignorance, illumine the world with the light of knowledge. So I invite you to hear Tony Ballard, that he's going to share his knowledge about the prejudice and perception of spirituality. Please welcome Mr. Tony Ballard.
Thank you, Camby's. Whoa. Hello, everyone. How are you? It's good to be here. I think I appreciate being asked. I'll make the decision after I'm finished. Maybe we'll do a head count now, then we'll do a head count when we're done and see how well I did. No, for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a college professor. I teach communications, and that can mean so many different things in this day and time. You know, it can mean a lot of the technological stuff. I'm not that smart. I actually just teach people how to talk, and considering the fact that most of you pretty much know how to do that, my job is pretty easy. But I actually teach public speaking. That was a joke. Y'all go ahead. All right. There we go. No, I teach public speaking and also interpersonal communication, and I always say, a little bit jokingly, but a little bit truthfully, that teaching doesn't necessarily mean you can absolutely do what you teach, or it doesn't mean that you do what you teach, but it does mean that you can pass along some information in a way that hopefully other people can benefit from, and I hope that's what I do this evening. In my classes, I teach up here at St. Petersburg College, right up here on the Clearwater campus. One of my favorite topics is perception. And I was surprised. I started out, I spent 10 years actually being a speech-language pathologist. And after that, I started teaching public speaking at the college and have done so ever since. And I was surprised, because of my background in speech-language pathology, I was used to working with people that actually had all kinds of obvious issues with communication. You know, some of them might have been stroke victims. Some of them may, have had pronunciation problems or vocal problems. And then, once I became a college professor, I really started wondering what was the point in doing what I was doing, teaching people how to speak, when on the surface it looked like everyone pretty much knew how to do what I was trying to teach them. And I actually questioned the credibility of my job. Is this really something that should be done? Well, in time, thank goodness, I found out absolutely it's something that is very much needed. But also, the good thing was I had to start reading a lot more about perception. And I started finding out that perception is so extremely important. And that's what I'd like to talk to you tonight about. I'd like to talk to you about perception. I'd like to talk to you about prejudice, how it connects with our perceptions. And I'd like to talk about perception and spirituality. So starting out, first of all, what is perception? It really is a very simple thing, but it's easier to talk about. Maybe I should rephrase, it's easier to do than it is to talk about. In simple terms, perception is actually the process by which we decide what things mean to us. Now think about what that means. We decide what things mean to us. If I were to take one of these chairs and put it up here and ask people what is that called, depending on what language you spoke, you'd call it what it's called in that language. I'm sure we have a few people in here that speak something other than English. I might be wrong. What would be I want to say the Persian word, but I know that's not the right word, the Farsi word for chair. Say that again, please. Sandali. Okay. So if I put a chair up here and I said, what's that? And asked someone who spoke only Farsi, they said sandali, if they could understand the question. Someone else who spoke English would say chair. But we all would be thinking the same thing. We all agree that that is an object that is used for us to rest our bodies on, and etc. Okay. But if we ask you more deeply, some of you may have a little more that you want to add to the meaning, and this is basically based on your personal experience with a chair. Now you think about that. Maybe someone actually has a memory where they were in front of a large crowd of people sitting on a chair, and they actually, the leg of the chair broke and they fell off the chair. And so if you ask them, what's that? They might say chair, but they also have this little memory, very possibly, of the time they were terribly embarrassed in front of all these people because they fell off that chair in front of all those people. And so consequently, they may feel a little uncomfortable with just the thought of that chair in front of a lot of people. Their meaning of the chair is slightly different from your own. Okay. In other words, they are perceiving it in a way that's a little different from the way the rest of us might be perceiving it. When it comes to applying meaning, the way you apply meaning, the way you decide what things mean to you, is based on your own personal experience. Based on your own personal experience. Now, obviously, there are times that that's not terribly important, but sometimes it's very, very important. Okay. Speaking of importance, as we are applying meaning, as we are perceiving, we decide what is important to us and what isn't important to us. We decide what we think is true or false. We decide what is desirable and what is undesirable. To a large extent, we even decide what is and what is not, what exists and what does not exist. We are actually choosing what's going to be foremost in our consciousness and what will simply be something on the sidelines. All of you, you came out here this evening, and if I asked you what were you thinking of when you got here, I might get different answers, depending on what was foremost in your mind at the time. Some of you might think, well, I love those gatherings at the Baha'i Center because food is all fantastic, and everything, and every time they have a meeting of the minds, they have this most wonderful food, okay? Or I'm going to see someone that I don't get to see very often, I'm going to get to see them. You might have been focusing on something different. Hopefully, as you were driving here, you were focusing on traffic. I really hope so. But the point is, we are actually choosing what will be foremost in our consciousness. Think about a time when you had an unpleasant job to do. You knew you had to do it, but you didn't want to do it. Now, somehow you were able to put it so far back in your mind that you didn't even think about it anymore. And then finally, the time came when you absolutely had to get this job done. You had to get it done. And now, unlike before, you can't think of anything else. Maybe it was that bill you had to pay that you kept putting off, or maybe it was cleaning the toilet, or maybe it was getting your oil changed, but you kept putting it off, and you were able to not even think about it. But then suddenly it becomes crucial that you get it done. And all of a sudden, it's all you can think about. Everything else around you now becomes an intrusion. You are focusing on that job that before wasn't important, but now it suddenly has all importance. The other things that you have to do now take a back seat, and the job takes the most importance. It grabs your focus. It holds your focus. Now, while you are constantly choosing what you're going to focus on, you're choosing, but you also have to organize it. You got to put it in some kind of order so that it makes sense to you. You have to make sense of it somehow. And we organize our world in different ways. Notice I said we organize our world. Things may be positioned in certain ways, but that doesn't mean that we would always choose the same way to organize it. We organize our world based on a variety of things. You look at yourself and at the world in an order that makes sense to you as an individual. Now, this is important because you look at yourself and the world and put it in an order that makes sense to you, even when you don't like it. Even when you don't like it. You'll often just get in the habit of focusing on certain things, putting them in a certain way. If I were to ask many of you what kind of day you had, no matter what happened, you might honestly say, I had a great day, no matter what happened. I could ask someone else, what kind of day did you have? And they experienced the same general day, but they say, I had a terrible day. Maybe they organized it in a different way than you did. You decide what things should go together and what things should be separated. And not just what things, but also what people. You decide what is up and what is down. Everyone look up. I'm serious. Everyone look up. You see the ceiling, right? Now, if you were hanging upside down, would up be in the same direction? Up would be in the same direction, but would you look in the same direction to see up? Of course not. Of course not. If you were hanging upside down, you'd have to look towards your feet to see up. All of a sudden, order is different. And we need to point out that your order is, frankly, at least a little bit different from everyone else's. It's a little bit different and may be very much like someone else's and very unlike someone else's. Let's take that thought and apply it to the world. How do you prefer your world? How do you prefer your life? How do you prefer your existence? How do you prefer that it all be organized? Just like we choose based on different preferences, we organize based on different preferences. And even though we are organizing things based on different preferences, there is this point in time where, in general, we have to come to some agreement. We have to come to some agreement. Married couples can tell you all about that, if they're going to live together and continue living together. There was a study done in which couples that had been married for a very long time were asked what made their marriage successful. Most said that their marriage was successful because they were best friends. We probably have a lot of married people in here, and I bet you'd probably say, well, we're best friends. If you've been married a long time, we're best friends. And yet, upon deeper questioning, what was discovered was that that had not always been true of those couples. Even though they believed it. They weren't exaggerating. They really believed it, but they weren't exaggerating. They said they were successful because they were best friends. But what had really happened is, while they were best friends at the time that they were being asked the question, it had really happened over time. They didn't start out that way, most of them. Somewhere along the line, those two people reached an agreement. Some of it was probably expressed, some of it unexpressed. They reached an agreement on how they were going to organize their life together, and sometimes even how they were going to organize their memories of their life together. They reached an agreement. So, you're choosing and you're organizing your existence. The third step of perception, because those are the first two steps. First you choose, then you organize. Now you have to interpret. You got to decide what it means to you. You decide what everything means to you. And your decisions are based on your experiences, based on your preferences. You decide what has value to you, what has no value to you. You decide what and who should be desired, what and who should be pursued. You decide what and who should be nurtured or even eliminated from your consciousness. Now, part of this perception includes how you perceive yourself, and we call this self-awareness. Think about it. You are a product, and I don't just mean a physical product. Of course, we're all a physical product. But you are the result of many things. You are constantly being created and recreated. So what makes up this creation? What makes up this creation? You are the product of the messages that others have conveyed to you from day one. The messages that others have conveyed to you from day one, and the messages that you are conveying to yourself. All of that goes into that product that becomes and continues to become you. The things that you heard and saw as you grew from childhood to adulthood became a part of who you are at this very moment. Some of those things really had little effect on you. Some of them had great effect on you, had deep and lasting effect on you. Some made you feel valued and appreciated, and some made you, actually may have made you question the value of life itself, or even question the value of you yourself. So what are you made of? What have those messages created? Are you made primarily of fear, love? Are you made of anger, hatred, uncertainty, cynicism, hope? Do you see yourself as having great value or little value? How are you building yourself and the people that you meet each and every day? Are you building mansions or are you building slums? Something worth thinking about. Now notice that the product that you are is based mainly on the abstract, the conceptual. Some might call it the spiritual, if you will. Things that are unseen and that are very difficult or even impossible to quantify and itemize. Now, our bodies can be terribly damaged and deformed, but if our spirits are strong, then we are healthier and happier than someone who may be the actual picture of physical perfection. We've all heard about those people that looked like they had everything, and yet they were miserable. And then we've seen those people who somehow found a way, in the face of great adversity, when you saw their adversity, and yet they found a way to somehow be content, to be happy. Their happiness was not based on the physical. The effect that the messages that we receive about the world and about ourselves give the spirit such strength or such weakness that the body doesn't really determine our reality. When our spirit is strengthened, the body is not the primary focus of our reality. Now, as we know, this body that really doesn't last very long. I mean, they're slowly, science is allowing us to live longer and longer and longer. But we still die. And we have periods of strength. But even with those periods of strength, we still are really quite fragile. Right now we're in the middle of that raging argument or the debate on gun control and gun laws and so forth, and I don't mean to get into that. But I mean, just thinking about guns, that unpleasant thing, what I find unpleasant, let's face it. One hole in the wrong place in your body and boom, you're dead. That's just how fragile that body is. Now imagine placing your primary sense of value on something that deteriorates so easily. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't take care of it and, keep it strong. And let's face it, the body is how we get around in the physical part of reality. And let's face it, healthy bodies get around more easily than the unhealthy ones. But the body has a very short shelf life. Just doesn't last that long compared to the spirit, which goes on forever. So, in that perceptual process you're constantly going through, you are choosing, you're organizing, you're interpreting, and you are deciding, what am I going to focus on? How am I going to create myself? How am I going to contribute to the creation of other people in this constant process? Now, in relation to perception, sometimes we actually try to take perceptual shortcuts, and we start discriminating incorrectly. Now, the word discrimination for many people is just a bad word, but the truth is, objectively speaking, it's really not a bad word. It's just what we do. We discriminate. This is white or something close to it. This is green. How could we know the difference if we were not able to discriminate? Studies have now shown that babies are able to discriminate ethnic differences at a very young age. But you need to understand what we mean when we say ethnic differences. Those are just the differences, and they react differently to people who look most like their primary caretaker. So in that way, they are discriminating, but they're not doing that discriminating that we often talk about, where you are placing a value judgment on someone's worth as a human being. So we often can get into the mistake of discriminating incorrectly. We create and believe things that appear to be true, but are actually false. And yet we will hang on to them as if they are true, actually remaining ignorant of what is true. And that's when we start becoming guilty of things like prejudice and stereotyping. We invest in perceptual beliefs that allow us to take advantage of others, disregard others, and deny their equal humanity. We make far-reaching assumptions based on little or no evidence, based on nothing but this physical shell that another soul inhabits, and we'll make far-reaching decisions about them. We may possibly internalize egotistical fears that justify mistrust in others. We look at other human beings and we put them in an extreme, separate category apart from ourselves. And sometimes this can manifest itself as hate, anger. Sometimes it's not quite so obvious. You know, I like to think of myself as an open-minded person. In fact, I've occasionally referred to myself with my students as Mr. We Are the World. You know, I just want to see everybody get together. I envision one day when, we'll have bridges across all the oceans right around the equator, and we can all go down to the equator and all join hands and sway back and forth and sing We Are the World. That'll be a wonderful day. But I can let you know of 2 occasions when I found out that I still had work to do in this regard, and we need to constantly be working on these things. Long time ago, when Albertsons was, sort of like the 24-hour king in the area before Walmart came along and took over, it was not unusual for me to go to Albertsons at any crazy time of night, because I'm a bit of an insomniac. This particular night, I had gone there, and I should say that, you know how sometimes in the news, all of a sudden, like right now, you're hearing a whole lot of stories, about guns. Well, back then, this was, I think, sometime in about the mid-'80s, there were a lot of stories about neo-Nazis, skinheads. I'm out, middle of the night, just left Albertsons. It's the Albertsons that is now Publix on the corner of Belcher and East Bay Drive. So I've just left, middle of the night, driving my little Kia Sophia. That's what I had at the time, a little Kia Sophia. I don't recommend that car. I'm driving my little Kia Sophia in the middle of the night, got my windows rolled up. It's a warm night, got my air running, got my radio playing, and along comes this white Mustang filled with young, muscular white guys, all with very close haircuts. And they pull up alongside me, and they're starting to point at me. I didn't have tinted windows. I had a Kia. Okay, there you go. But they're starting to point at me, and their faces are all messed up, and they're pointing at me, and they're yelling something at me, and I can't hear what they're saying, but they're yelling, and they're pointing, and I look, and I say, oh boy, the skinheads have found me. Let's let them have their fun, and they'll leave me alone. But they didn't. They did not leave me alone. This probably only lasted about 10 or 15 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I just kept minding my own business, and they kept yelling and pointing, and their faces were messed up. I could see them out the side of my eye. Finally, I decided, you know what? If I'm going out like a man. So I reached over to roll the window down. No, I did not have power windows. I had to actually reach over to roll the window down. And that's when I heard what they were saying. Turn on your lights. I'm driving in the middle of the night with my lights off. I have put them now in the character of racist skinheads, but they're really trying to help me. Who was the real racist in that story? It was me. It was me. And of course, yeah, I did turn my lights on and then they were gone. You know, I had to pull over and get out of my car and, you know. Another time that I had to face the fact that I am not where I thought I was actually had to do with a different car. I had a Toyota Corolla. I still have a Toyota Corolla. Toyota Corolla once had a slogan, world's most dependable car. They may still be. This one was not. I figured if it's the world's most dependable car, I don't have to buy a new one. I'll get a used one. It's still going to be dependable. But I had this car 2 years, and this particular day, it had broken down on me. Now, you got to understand, it had broken down on me several times. And this was the third time in 2 years that the alternator had gone out. Alternator's out. Okay, by this time, I'm at work. I've already had the car towed. And I had been taking the car before to the people that you can trust. And we all know the people that you can trust when it comes to working on your cars. Number one, they're guys. Greasy-fingered guys. They usually have a shirt, a button-down blue or white shirt with a little sewn-on name tag with a one-syllable name, Tom, Joe, might be two names, Harry, but those are the people I'd been taking it to. And if the guy was missing a body part, he had extra points. Because that means he actually had sacrificed a body part for his craft. These are the people you want working on your cars. But this particular day, I had taken it, sent it to the same place each time. Third time, alternator's out. So I'm ticked off. Now, at this particular moment, I'm actually at a vending machine purchasing a soda. And one of my former students happened to come up behind me, happened to be a young lady. And I'm going to go ahead and point out for a particular reason, a very attractive young lady. There's a reason, I'll get to that. And she asked me, "How you doing, Mr. Ballard?" Now, I got to tell you, I knew she just meant hello. But she asked me how I was doing. And I decided I'm going to tell her. I was ticked off, and I started telling her about my car and how this was the third alternator, and why in the heck am I on my third alternator in 2 years? And she starts asking me questions. She says, "Did you check this? Did you check that? Did you check this? Did you check this?" And I'm answering her questions, but I actually asked her a question, and I did not mean for it to sound sarcastic, but it was. It had popped out before I had the chance to filter it. It was a simple question. My question was simply, "Oh, you think you know something about cars?" Yeah, that's what I asked her. "You think you know something about cars?" See, she's not supposed to know anything about cars. She's too young, she's too female, and she's too attractive. All points against her. These are not the people you want to take your car to. But she says, "Well, I do work on my own car, and back when I was in the Air Force, I was a jet mechanic." Oh, my God. You were a jet mechanic. Well, maybe you might know a little bit of something about my Toyota Corolla, maybe. So now I start telling her all about it, and she starts telling me, "Call those people and tell them to run this test, and run this test, and run this test, and run this test." And now, of course, I'm all ears. And I call them and I tell them this. I don't know if they did anything that I told them to, but I will tell you, I kept that car for about 4 more years and never had another problem with it. I can't help but think that they did what she said do. But let's think about that. Before I would take her advice, she had to be overqualified. She couldn't just know something about cars. If she had been some guy asking me the same questions early on, I said, okay, I'll give him a call. But no, she had to be a jet mechanic before I'd take her advice on how to work on a simple car. That's prejudice. That's prejudice. So I had to face the fact that Mr. We Are the World still has a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. You do not have to be a racist or a misogynist to have a racist moment or a misogynistic moment. We can easily slip into that kind of thinking without thinking. We need to be constantly checking ourselves and challenging our current perceptions of things to make sure that we are dealing with current reality in a way that will give us truth. Now I want to talk to you about something called negotiation. We've talked about perception on an individual basis, but we are not in vacuums. While your perceptions are your own, they don't exist in a vacuum any more than you exist in a vacuum. Your perceptions do affect others. Have you ever become afraid because of what someone else told you, whether it was true or not? Have you ever believed something based simply on someone else's version of a story, whether it was true or not? Have you ever decided to make a change because of something someone else has said? If you have, and you all have, you have experienced negotiation. What we often call perceptual negotiation, but let's just keep it short to negotiation. Negotiation is the process by which we actually have an effect on each other's perceptions and beliefs. We share our stories, our experiences, our opinions, our truth, perhaps even our lies, because they can have an effect too. You taste some delicious food and you tell your friend, "Oh, you got to try this." So they do, and they like it. You have added to their reality. I have a friend, I'll call him Phil, he's a friend and coworker. I like sushi. And Phil had never had sushi. And one day I asked him, "You want to go to lunch?" He says, "Okay, where do you want to go?" I said, "There's this little sushi restaurant." "I don't eat sushi." Actually, what he said was, "I don't like sushi." I said, "You don't like sushi?" I said, "Have you ever had sushi?" "No, but I know I don't like it." "How do you know you don't like it if you've never?" "I just know." Come on. I said, "You don't have to order sushi in a sushi restaurant. Let's just go and you might get something else. You don't have to try sushi." But we went there, we got sushi. I let him try some of my sushi. Next thing you know, he's got one of the menus checking off everything. "I want this, I want this, I want this." And after a while, he goes telling everybody, "I tried some sushi. I like sushi. It's pretty good stuff. You need to try it sometime." The point is, I affected his reality in a very simple way. Sushi. Now, through this process of negotiation, we create a new reality. A new reality. Your view of reality can affect my view, and mine can affect yours. When our views of reality combine, the final result is a new perspective, a new view, a new way of seeing things. And in the end, the new reality may be a little more like your old perspective, it may be a little bit more like my old perspective, or it may be something that is completely different from anything that either of us expected. Completely different from anything that existed before. Are you enjoying these electric lights? I am. Have you used a computer lately? Did you get here in an automobile? Hopefully not a Kia Sophia. Do you know anyone with an artificial body part? Maybe an artificial hip or something. You have benefited from a new perspective. Think of the world as it existed 100 years ago, or even longer. This very nation has gone through cataclysmic changes, as has the world. Let's face it, 150 years ago, I could have been a slave. Today, I can be president. Think about that. That's change. Now, think about some of your children. Now, some of your children that long ago, 100, 150 years ago, could have been working long hours in factories, living their entire lives without the benefit of education. And people would have thought it was okay. It's the way things are. Women and minorities wouldn't have been voting. Many of us would have had much shorter lives. And these are all very unpleasant truths, but it's true nonetheless. So why did those things change? Quite simply, because someone had a different vision. Someone had a vision that said the way things are must change. And they shared that vision. They changed minds. They changed hearts. Think of the many changes that have occurred up to this very moment, and you will see the result of negotiation. And you may agree with some of those changes, you may even disagree with some of them, but when enough members of humanity decide that things must change, it does. Admittedly, it's usually a slow process, but it does happen. It takes time, but it does happen. But then there are some people that you need to be aware of, and I like to call those people the old guard. There always is the old guard, those who resist even positive change because the new reality is not in their comfort zone, what I really prefer to call their familiar zone. I like to call it familiar zone because sometimes it's really not comfortable, it's just familiar. It's what they know. So the old guard holds on to the old reality, the old perspective, even when that perspective has done great harm and continues to do great harm. They hang on to it for dear life. Maybe it was even good and even right when it was first conceived, but now, even though it isn't right for current conditions, they hang on to it anyway. They hang on to it because it's what they know. Some experts call that hanging on to obsolete information. Information that at one time was useful, did you some good. Now, it actually hurts you, but you hang on to it anyway. I heard a motivational speaker speak one time about something that he referred to as a monkey trap. Now, some of you probably know what a monkey trap is. Apparently, down in South America, there are some people who actually hunt monkeys. And one way that they hunt monkeys is they will take a bottle, put a piece of fruit in it, and actually bury it in the ground. And the opening of the bottle is at ground level, so the monkey really can't see the bottle. He just sees the opening, and he smells the fruit. He smells the fruit, puts his hand down into the bottle, grabs the fruit. Now, of course, with his fingers extended, he could put his hand down there, but once he holds on to that fruit, he can't get it back out. And he's trying to get that fruit out, and of course, the hunters who have been watching him come along, and you know what happens. The very thing he was hanging on to for life got him killed, ended his life. Sometimes we're hanging on to obsolete information, and it's like a monkey trap. It hurts us instead of helping us. Now, what about this new perspective that people want to share, that the old guard always resists? What is the source of this new perspective? What's the source of this new idea or new ideas? Well, they come from the realm of thought, the realm of mind, even the realm of spirit. Some discoveries, admittedly, are just accidental. I remember reading about the discovery of the microwave oven. Some of you have probably read about this. There was a scientist who was already working on microwaves, and he happened to have a candy bar in the pocket of his lab jacket. And he gets too close to the microwaves, and the candy bar melted. And of course, he went about trying to figure out what made the candy bar melt so quick. Turned out it was microwaves. Boom. Is there anyone in here who does not have a microwave oven? There may be a few, but I've got mine. I couldn't live without it, I got to tell you. What would I do without 4-minute popcorn? So there's that old guard. Again, resisting the new perspective. That new perspective that comes from mind, spirit, thought. And again, some discoveries are accidental and even unintended. It really just amounts to serendipity. Some, however, were the result of intentional search, deep thinking, hard work, and diligence. And some new perspectives are so great, so far-reaching, that the words new perspective really are inadequate to express their importance and their far-reaching effect on the world and on humanity. There are words that better describe this type of new perspective when cataclysmic change is unavoidable. You've heard these words. Has anyone ever heard the phrase New Age? Have you ever heard the word revelation? Have you ever heard the word dispensation? These words apply to major changes in the physical realm that are the effect of some spiritual source. And these changes are a major break from the system under which the world of humanity previously existed. What is that spiritual source? That source is usually referred to with titles that refer to a deity. Some people may say God, some say Dios, some say Dieu, some say Allah. There are other words that apply to that deity. And those who are first entrusted with this new revelation, this new dispensation, are manifestations of that spiritual source. They come with a message and a mission. And that mission, quite simply, is to simply share the new perspective, share the revelation, begin a new dispensation, a new outpouring. Now, I'm sure you are familiar with some of the names of these manifestations or messengers of God. Anyone ever heard of Abraham, Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, Krishna, Jesus? You may or may not be familiar with two others, the Bab and Baha'u'llah. These messengers of God share that new perspective that is right for the time that its revelation is dispensed to the world. Those who accept the new perspective then go on to share it with others. They share it in their words, they share it in their deeds. Now, unfortunately, not everyone is always ready to jump on board the new perspective, no matter how good it may be, no matter how good it may sound. Some simply walk away unaware of the importance of this new perspective that Jesus Christ referred to as the good news. Others feel it's just, too far a stretch. Whoa, you mean to tell me all this can be? Oh, I'm not familiar with this. It's too difficult or too unrealistic to realize and understand. Now, some of the old guard, once again, often try to obliterate the early followers of the new perspective. They torture them, they kill them, in hopes of frightening others and keeping them ignorant of this new perception, this new dispensation. They hold on to hopes of preserving the old way because that's in their familiar zone. They fail to see that the new perspective from a spiritual source validates the old way, but still helps humanity to move on to a way that is more suited for the age in which they live. Some examples of people holding on to the old guard. Every time you hear of someone who does harm to someone because of their religious beliefs, they're hanging on to the old guard, to the old perspective, rather. What they don't understand is that the new perspective is more fitted to meeting the challenges and solving the problems of the new day. So together, the old guard and those following the new perspective struggle to coexist. The old guard is struggling to hang on to some vestige of a bygone revelation that now has really become a perverted version of its former self. A revelation that now bears only a shadow of its original God-given intention, its original beauty, its original purity. The old guard remain slaves to their prejudice and their vain imaginings. The followers of the new perspective work diligently to share and establish this new standard that can improve humanity's lot, from the quality of its physical existence right down to its spiritual core. Now, the followers of the new perspective, admittedly, they sometimes falter, lose ground, they become disillusioned, only to regain strength and add to their numbers in this never-ending quest to negotiate a new reality that is closer to what the spiritual source, God, had intended for all of creation. This is why we're here. This is why each new revelation, each new dispensation presents a new perspective, one that validates the original truth and the original intentions of previous dispensations, but brings in a new way, new thought, a new version of the truth that is still as true as the past dispensations. Many of us here this evening believe that this new perspective for today towards a new reality, this new dispensation, is exemplified in the Baha'i faith. The Baha'i faith. Now, I won't go through the history of the Baha'i faith, but it is what we believe to be the newest dispensation in a long, long, long history that has spanned all of mankind's existence. Now, I like to play devil's advocate, and some would say that that's actually typecasting, but I like to play devil's advocate. I like to ask questions as if I didn't believe what the followers of the new perspectives say. So, playing devil's advocate, you mean to tell me that there is only one God by whom we were all created? Yes. You mean to tell me that there is only one religion, and that religion being the unifying principle that undergirds all of the world's major faiths? That religion being faith in God? Yes. You mean to tell me that there is only one humanity? That the divisions of culture and ethnicity and politics and national origin, being man-made and divisive, are therefore less important than the unity of the entire human race? Yes. You mean to tell me that women and men, being equal in the sight of God, are to be seen as equals by all of mankind? Yes. You mean to tell me that all forms of prejudice must be eliminated? Prejudice being an obstacle to both truth and unity? Yes. You mean to tell me that all humanity is to have access to compulsory education, that this is the will of God, and in the case where education for all is an impossibility, it's the girls who are to be educated over the boys, considering that women are most often the child's first teacher? Yes. You mean to tell me that science and religion must agree, since both are a method for pursuing truth? And if science and religion are not in accord with one another, either one or both are wrong? Yes. You mean to tell me that believing in God carries with it the responsibility and the right for each individual to investigate truth on their own? Yes. You mean to tell me that while there is a need for governing bodies, there is no longer a need for a special class of clergy, since we're all to be servants and teachers of God, serving God as well as serving and teaching ourselves and each other? Yes, we mean all of those things. You are all creating your world and yourselves, even now. You have the power to negotiate the world that you want to live in, that you want your children and their children to live in. Even when things don't look good, together, we're working towards a shared perspective that is the result of what we negotiate. And the old guard doesn't want that process to continue. They want to stop it in its tracks. If you believe that your vision is for the good of all humanity, negotiate, share your story, state your opinion, live the example. If you question it, you have the God-given right to independent investigation of the truth. I'm sure that if you will embark on this process of investigation and negotiation, you will find that the spiritual source of all reality will lead you to that truth. Thank you.